Welcome back to Newsnight. Rivers State Governor Sim Fubara has reaffirmed his acceptance of the presidential peace edict and his commitment to executing it. He says he has studied the terms and discovered that the peace pact is not as bad as it may be portrayed. Governor Fubara made his reaffirmation during the Christmas statewide broadcast in Port Harcourt. The governor, who believes no price is too much to pay for peace, added that the pact is not a death sentence, but directs ways to lasting peace and stability in the state.
As a principal participant in the entire saga, I have taken some time to study the terms therein and have come to the conclusion that the peace pact is not as bad as it might be portrayed by those genuinely opposed to it. It is certainly not a death sentence. It affords some way towards a lasting peace and stability in our dear state. Accordingly, I reaffirm my acceptance of the Presidential Peace Proclamation and my commitment to implementing both the spirit and the letter of the declaration in such a way and manner that will restore political stability to our dear state without compromising the collective interests of our people and our cherished and shared democratic value. Already, both parties have demonstrated some goodwill in the implementation process with the withdrawal of the purported impeachment notice on their part and the release of hitherto withheld allowances of the members of the State's House of Assembly by the government.
I'm joined in the studio by Obi Ndukwe, the publisher of the Beam newspaper in Port Harcourt and the president of the Citizens Quest for Truth initiative over in Port Harcourt is a lawyer, Law-Ekine. Good to see you both and Merry Christmas. Let's start from the message there from Sim Fubara. It looks to be a year that may end pretty well for everyone involved. Let's start with you, Obi. Now, what do you make of the statement coming in from Governor Fubara saying that he's taking a second look? Second look, they say, is always the best. And he found out that it's not as bad as people have made it look.
Well, it didn't come to me as a surprise. The position of the governor today, although it was long expected. I had thought that after the meeting at the Aso Rock, the broadcast should have come in. But no matter how late it came, I think it's also a welcome development. Yeah, peace is priceless. Everybody sues for peace. And for those who felt that the intervention of the president was unconstitutional, they also forgot that peace is also part of our constitution. Whatever you can do, even in the courts, there are times that the judge may decide to say, okay, you go and then see if you can reconcile and, you know, come back to tell the court. So you can actually get justice, you can actually get issues sorted out outside the framework of the court. And that's also a peace process. It's also constitutional. So I think that the position of the governor so far, as it relates to the broadcast, is a welcome development. But we'll probably scrutinize the aspects of the broadcast, and we'll see whether it's something he actually means to do or is all part of political rhetoric.
Well, Henry, he seemed to have started already, but again, as they say for lawyers like yourself, there's always an ADR somewhere, alternative dispute resolution. Does this fall within?
Yes, thank you. It is important to emphasize that even as much as one would admire disposition to peaceful resolutions, but then that must be on the platform of the Constitution, to the extent that the laws that enable that kind of resolution, even if it's an alternative dispute resolution mechanism, then of course the constitutional provisions must not be jettisoned, must not be undermined. That's the point that those who spoke, and I think I also hold that view, with respect to the unconstitutionality of those purported clauses in those in the said peace pact. It is not our view or my view that alternative dispute resolution mechanism or any approach whatsoever to probably pursue peace is condemnable, no, but that you cannot do that. This is the emphasis. You cannot purport to resolve any dispute without being guided by the provisions of law. And let me quickly also refer to where it's probably also argued that settlement can also even take place out of court. It is not permissible that individuals or authorities will agree on a common purpose to commit any infraction against the provisions of the Constitution or extant provisions of the law. So it doesn't matter who is involved. It doesn't really matter who the parties are. As a fundamental requirement of our Constitution, it's even to the effect that every person and every authority is guided by the principles and provisions of our Constitution. All authorities, including the President, the governors of 36 states of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the legislators elected into the legislative houses, and every person who has taken an oath pursuant to the 7th schedule of our Constitution to protect and observe and ensure compliance with the provisions of the Constitution would be guided in every consideration, including mediation. If the president or a governor is to mediate between disputants in any dispute howsoever, and then if the issues are legal and constitutional issues, then they must be guided by the provisions of the Constitution. That's been the argument. And no argument will undermine that very important and fundamental provision. And that's the argument that Section 1 of the Constitution remains supreme. And the binding principle, or to a simple provision, it is the supremacy of the Constitution that must be observed. And Section 1 has made our Constitution supreme above every discretion or disposition or consideration of any individual, any person or any authority. And in fact, those persons or authorities are bound by the provisions of the Constitution. So when you take out some of those clauses in the purported agreement, I hold that strong view, that is purported agreement. When you take out those clauses that relate to constitutional provisions, then you will find that the supposed agreements or the directives, if you like, the decrees and orders that were issued by Mr. President, allegedly, and then that the governor today in his address is saying he's going to comply with those directives, are purely unconstitutional. They run contrary with the provisions of the Constitution. They interfere with the constitutional powers of a governor. It doesn't matter whether the governor of Rivers State as an individual has elected to comply with those principles or those agreements, but he cannot depart from the oath of office he has taken.
Henry, let me jump in here. Apologies, to Barton. Let me bring in Obi, because we've heard him, two key points there. He says, well, it's not as bad, number one. Then two, he says, well, it's not also a death sentence. Does it worry you, Obi, that it just might be? Because we've also heard from Nyesom Wike, who also said he didn't ask the president to come in. The president did that as leader of the country. Looking at these two leaders, Fubara and Nyesom Wike, none has spoken against that pact. Does it worry you that many who are kicking against it are just a meddlesome interloper?
Yeah, that's funny. Anyway, like I said, the two parties involved, the Nyesom Wike group, the Fubara group, the governors group, I mean to say, they have agreed to resolve their problem. It's an internal affair. We are not in a law court. It's the matter, the issues have not been presented to a law court. The issue of the constitutionality or who is the speaker, that's a topic for another day. Because if we begin to delve into that, I have my own reservations. But on the
is
issue,
it something that you would love to share?
Yeah, I will. Because
by all means, go ahead.
Yeah, because if you're talking about first, the matter came before the president. Whoever sued for peace, whoever asked the president to intervene, we don't know, because even Wike has said he didn't ask for that. Yeah, the president could have also done that based on his position as the president of the country. So everything must not end in the courts. And then, if you are saying that alternative conflict resolution is not part of the constitution, then you are telling us that even when we have people go on plea bargains and all that, where ordinarily they would have been, prosecuted and then maybe jailed, and they are now going for plea bargain. What is a plea bargain? It's all part of, you know, resolving issues without necessarily going through the legality of the matter. Sometimes you go through these legalities and you end up getting nothing. We don't want a situation where there will be a constitutional crisis, because that's where Rivers State is actually heading to. Now you have two people claiming, I am the speaker. This one says I was elected. The House of Assembly complex was burnt, and then the next day the 27 members sat. Rivers State has 32 lawmakers, one died, so there are 31. Now 27 sat under the speaker, known to everyone, Martin Zamehule, and they did what? They said, okay, the leader of the party, of the assembly, we are going to suspend him, and I think 3 others, making them 4. Now, the next day, somebody goes in front of the government house. There's a place you call 105 in government house, you know, and stands there to say, I have been elected. Now there's a court issue, and then everyone is claiming. But let me even ask you, when people are suspended, when lawmakers are suspended, do they still have the right to even sit anywhere and claim leadership? That's number one. And then number two, when you say that we shouldn't go to the we shouldn't bother about resolutions, peaceful resolutions and all that, the people, as far as I'm concerned, the parties involved have decided to resolve their matter. Ordinarily, this ought not to have been in public domain. It's something that they could have as well handled. And if the governor had made this broadcast earlier than this time, the people you see who are meddling now, who are trying to take it as if it is their own problem, they wouldn't be there. It's just that the delay now offered them the opportunity to do what, and that's why they are not stopping, even when the man has made a broadcast to say, look, I align with every letter and spirit of that resolution. Don't forget, yesterday, Wike said something in the church. He said, 2 of us were called in by the president and we were told some things to do. And then the governor refused to do. That was what necessitated the next meeting, the enlarged meeting. And then somebody says, I was in that meeting. This is what the president did. This is more like a decree. It was more like somebody who had a gun on his head and was asked to do this. But the person was not part of that first meeting, which we do not have the details of what transpired. But if the minister now says the governor did it, and less than 24 hours after, the governor comes up to say, look, I abide by every letter and spirit of whatever there was. I mean, it shouldn't be a problem. What we want to see is whether he's actually keeping to his word. What part of the resolutions has he been able to meet up with? I think he has said they've paid the lawmakers their outstanding allowances and the rest of. But we are still looking at the other matters that are in court. Because the other day, when the matter came up, one of the cases came up in court, the lawyer for the lawmakers said, we are withdrawing. Then the one standing for the governor said, I have not been briefed to withdraw. And then the matter was adjourned till January 20-something thereabout, which means that the matter is still pending in the court, in spite of the commitment of the governor to do what? To abide by the resolutions. So I think that we may all be meddling into something that we really don't have. Because like I said the other day, these people were together. They know how they got to this point where the governor emerged as candidate and became the governor. The Wike himself knows the role he played. He knows how he fought to ensure that Fubara became governor. And then suddenly people who were not part of the conversation are now taking upon themselves to say, no, it must be like this. I think they need to put themselves in a room, both of them, even without the president, and then talk about the things that they spoke in the beginning.
Well, talking about beginning, let's see if we can wrap up this quickly with Henry. Are there other means other than what you already say is not, you know, the way to go to resolve this? Because sometimes, going with Obi, there are lawyers who say, you know, the courts would ask you to go back to status quo, antebellum. Isn't that what it is almost in that particular agreement?
Suleiman, see, there are some very fundamental issues that I think I need to raise here, especially listening to my colleague. It is fundamental that there is every expectation, every citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria has a constitutional responsibility to protect the Constitution. So there is nothing like middle-some interlopers in this discussion. There is no such thing. We are not discussing private matters between Nyesom Wike and Sim Fubara as private individuals. The parties in this dispute must be identified. Every mediator has three critical things to look out for. What is the dispute? Who are the parties? Before you talk about the interest and the position of the parties. And then the parties fundamentally here, we are discussing issues about Rivers State government, far bigger and separate from Nyesom Wike and Sim Fubara. It's about everybody in Rivers State. So the constitutional issues are also issues that any citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria can get into. It must be clear, and there is no option to this. There is under Section 13 of the Constitution and Section 24, every citizen has a constitutional responsibility, and civic one at that, to protect any provision of the Constitution. So you can challenge anybody who is doing anything that contravenes with the provisions of the Constitution anywhere in this country. There is nothing like middle-some interloper in this context. Then, having said that, there is no option with respect to not all the 8 points in that purported agreement that I raised issues about, but the constitutional issues. You have no option but just the provisions of the Constitution. Let me take one or two out of it. You cannot in any way mediate or talk about how you will interfere with the constitutional powers of a governor. Whether Sim Fubara decides to relinquish his own responsibilities or his own powers, it's his business. But he cannot change the provision of our Constitution. That is only and only a governor that can appoint commissioners to his cabinet. You cannot mediate that. You cannot negotiate that. And somebody directs a governor who to appoint. You cannot also negotiate or mediate on constitutional issues as clear as to what procedure that must go through the lawmaking, particularly with respect to appropriation bill becoming appropriation law. There is no way you can mediate to jettison Section 109, subsection 1 and paragraph G of the Constitution. And all these parties, all these individuals, the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and the Governor of Rivers State, including the legislators, have sworn to an oath to uphold and protect this Constitution. They cannot, at any time in any consideration, go into a mediation, closed door. We're not talking about closed door issues. There's no private business between Sim Fubara and Nyesom Wike. If they do have, they can discuss that in Rumo Prikom or anywhere else, or at Opobo town. But if we're discussing issues about governance and constitutional powers of the governor, nobody should talk about private matters and private issues. If they have a private agreement that is not known to law, they can go and enforce that in their private homes. But we're talking about constitutional issues.
Henry, looks like certainly this conversation will keep coming. But again, I think we're out of time. I'd like to thank you very much for being such nice company, spatiating on this, Obi Ndukwe and Henry Ekine.